Thank you very much. My name is Chinedu Umba. I am the steering committee chair for the JPDS. The JPDS is the parent initiative that's organizing this seminar. And this seminar is being run by Knowledge Hub. Knowledge Hub, like I did say, is powered by JPDS. JPDS is Jacksonites Professional Development Series. It is an initiative of alumni group of the University of Nigeria Nsukka Mass Communication graduates. And so we decided that it's really important to build capacity in the academia, and that's why we run the Knowledge Hub seminar series. And today we're going to be talking about qualitative research, understanding qualitative research, when and how to use it. We have assembled very eminent scholars from across the globe. We have Dr. Charles Okibo of North Dakota State University. He is a professor emeritus with lots of years experience as a practitioner and as a teacher. We've got Dr. Bella Ezuma from Murray State University in the United States. We've got Dr. Mustafa Malam from the Department of Mass Communication, Bayero University, Kano. We've got our own Dr. R. Adenira of Lagos University, Lagos, and we've got Dr. Nuhu Gapsiso of the University of Maiduguri in Borno State. Our moderator for today is Chooks. You can see him there, Chooks. Is your mic okay now? And I'll hand over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. So over to Chooks, and he's going to run the show. Go ahead, Chooks.
Apologies for that small hitch. Well, thank you so much, Prof. And hello and good evening, Nigeria. Good morning, North America. And greetings to everyone around the globe who has signed in to this program. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the third edition of Mixed Methods Research Seminars. It's actually a professional development seminar series powered by Jacksonites Worldwide Forum through the Knowledge Hub initiative. As Chinedu just said, in the last 3 months, we've been treated to a cocktail of highly stimulating presentations on these same research methods, ranging from the mixed method research in the first month and to action research in the second month. And today we are engaging with another variant called qualitative research. My name is Dr. Chooks. I am on the faculty of the Department of Mass Communication, National Open University of Nigeria. I'm delighted to be moderating. I don't know if Bamalu is here now.
No, not yet. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, as usual, today's webinar is loaded. Our resource persons are drawn from Nigeria, from the United States of America, even Canada. So permit me to quickly recognize some of them who are directly and indirectly instrumental to this initiative and for its sustenance up to this moment. I'd like to recognize our teacher of teachers and the researcher for excellence and the role model, Professor Charles Okibo. Okibo is from North Dakota University. Actually, he's been emeritus professor there. We also have Professor Mba from Canada. We are expecting Dr. Marcel Mbamalo, who is an advisor of the Professional Development Series, and then Professor Gabiso, Dr. Bella Ezuma, Dr. Adeniro, Dr. Mustafa Malam, and so on and so forth. Will be playing a special role today. Well, the highlights of today's program, I like to run it through so that we get to know, how we're going. The first thing is to welcome remarks by Dr. Mbamalo. I'm here. And then the second, done that. And then quickly, after that, the question and answer series will come, and then a vote of thanks. For now, I don't know if we should do the welcome remarks. Professor, what do you say?
We'll go ahead, and when he joins, I guess we'll give him a chance to.
You have already welcomed him?
Oh, he's here. 1 second, he's here.
Okay, so I said, we have one of us, a member of the PD Professional Development Series advisors, and the publisher of one of the most flourishing online newspapers, Dr. Marcel Mbamalo is going to give us a very brief welcome remark. If Dr. Mbamalo is here, he is going to come on stage any moment from now.
Thank you very much. Does anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, everyone.
Thank you for joining, Doctor, and we're glad to have you.
Yes, I was struggling to join in. Actually, I've been on transit, heading to the airport now. But thank God I've been able to join it now. I thank everyone, JPDS, where to be. I want to make I don't know how long the program has gone, but just to say I'm happy to be here despite the odds. Happy to join the group of professionals, talented professionals, Jacksonites. I must say that this program is something that this is the third edition. It's something that has been adding a lot of value to us in the profession, in the industry, a kind of strengthening the bond, strengthening that relationship between the town and the gown, especially when it has to do with academic research. The essence of the JPDS.
That's why it doesn't
not be oversized in terms of, especially when we consider the role it's playing or the potential role it has to play going forward in building capacity among the academics. Research is key to development, whether it's the generic research that we know or the applied research is very, very key. And see, it's much more in the media industry where there seems to be a serious gap between the skill demand, the capacity demand in the marketplace and what we have currently as curriculum in the education sector in the universities. So I think that this particular edition speaks to the core of the problem, which has to do with kind of having the right capacity to identify what the problems with our society is, what the problem with the economy is, what the problem with the nation is, and then coming out with solutions, and then communicating these solutions will now become another layer of action. So I think it's something that every university, every institution, not just university, should be involved in, should encourage, should support to ensure that the quality of research that we have in our universities is such that it lends support to the problems, to solving the problems we have in the general society, especially in our in the media space. Good enough, there is a curriculum on bundling in the university when it has to do with communication as it's were now, So this particular program that we're having today couldn't have come at a better time than now for us to align actions between town and gown and begin to look at how our university system will help to solve societal problems. So by way of a background, we know the first one that we did, the knowledge hub, as it were, the first one that we did was on the, I think it was about the mix. I can't just remember that we did something on the about. Sorry, I can't remember exactly the topic, our first topic. But the important thing to say here is that
it was mixed methods. Mixed methods.
Actually, yeah, I think it's mixed method. Yeah, and but this particular one talking about, I think the second one was action research.
Action research, yes.
Action research, right?
Yes, you're right.
And then this particular one that has to do with qualitative research, you know, I think it's something that would have come at a better time than now. And my call is for everyone, members and participants alike, to pay attention to whatever is going to be discussed today and make our own contribution the way we think with all our passion. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mbamalu. He is the editor-in-chief and publisher of Prime Business Africa and one of our JPDS steering committee advisors, and a very proud alumnus of the Department of Mass Communication, University of Nigeria. Thank you so much for that welcome remarks. Right away, we want to get into the business, and I would like to have the pleasure of introducing once again the speakers for this occasion. Our main speaker is Professor Charles Okibo, Emeritus Professor, North Dakota State University, USA. He's also a former registrar of Advertising Practitioners Council of Nigeria, indeed the first to be in that position, and also a former lecturer, Department of Mass Communication, UNA. Yes, his former days, former that, but by his inclination, he has always been with us. He has never left us. One of those things is what he's doing for us right now. And all these things he's doing are pro bono. We welcome you, sir. Thank you for joining, and thank you for what you're doing. The next person that will be presenting is Dr. Bellany Ezuma, who is of the Murray State University in the USA. She's also of the clergy, Sister Bella. I think that's what they normally call her. You're welcome to this program. Thank you for joining. Thank you for all the efforts. We also have in the house Dr. Mustafa Mala of Bayero University, Kano, the Department of Mass Communication. I hope he's in the house too.
He is. He popped in and he dropped off. He'll be joining again.
Okay. Thank you for being part of this program. Also is Dr. Rahimat Adeniro of the Faculty of Communication, or School of Communication, actually, Lagos State University. Thank you, madam, for being with us. I thank you for your time. We're glad to have you. And then Dr. Nuhu Gapsiso of University of Maiduguri, also of the Department of Mass Communication. He was with us last month when we did the action research, and we really enjoyed what he brought to the table. Just briefly before the professor will take the stage, I'd like to mention that the presentations are just speaking notes. The speakers are likely to spend 10 to 15 minutes for each of the presentations. The main papers will definitely be mailed to participants today, where they will get the meat and gist of the presentations. At the end of the presentations, we'll have a question and answer session, which will be taking up to 15 to 20 minutes. And after that, a vote of time. So in all, we are looking at the next 1 hour, 15, 1 hour, 20 minutes, we should be done with this session. Thank you once again for tuning in. Thank you for joining. And I'm sure Professor Kiwa will be waiting in the wings. I want him to now take the floor virtually to make the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Chooks, for a comprehensive introduction. Once again, I thank Jacksonites, those here present, and others who couldn't join for their interest in making sure that the Department of Mass Communication at the University of Nigeria and Nsukka, which was the first in tropical Africa, stays up to date in providing instruction both to students and all their friends across the country, and indeed across the world, because being the first Department of Mass Communication in tropical Africa, it set the tone for many other similar programs across the continent. And so today we are continuing in that tradition that was started in 1962 at Nsukka. It's my pleasure to talk to you again today on research. When I joined the Department of Mass Comm in 1982, my main area of interest was communication research. And we have continued in that trajectory since then. As Chooks told you, we have a lot of good speakers today. In fact, our entire package is 44 slides. All of us together put a slide presentation, and the deck has 44 slides. By the end of our presentations, when we incorporate the questions you will ask us, we believe we may have up to 50 slides, which we will plan to make available to you before the weekend is over. So if you miss anything in our presentation, you can rest assured you will get it in the slide package, which will be on its way to you as soon as the webinar is over. Our presentation today will start with qualitative research, what it is. You can go to the next slide. And then we talk about the rationale, why we do qualitative research. Then we talk about the wide scope. Qualitative research is so wide. In fact, among our team here today, we came up with more than 25 different methods of doing qualitative research. Then Nuhu Gapsiso from Unimed will tell us how we do it. It's the same way we do most research. And we like to hear from Nuhu the 4 essential steps in doing qualitative research. He will emphasize interpretation, interpreting your results. And then we'll deal with examples from EUK, where Mustafa has some interesting examples of his students using qualitative research for their dissertation. Most interesting one is their analysis of communication research in Nigerian universities in 25 years, identified the patterns and the trends. Very interesting study. And then we'll conclude by taking questions from you. So let's move on to qualitative research, what it is. Qualitative research is easy to describe because if it's qualitative, it means it's not quantitative. If it's quantitative, it means we have numbers, we have statistics, we have precise measures. We are using surveys or doing experimental research. If it's qualitative, it means we are being more descriptive. We are putting ourselves in the shoes of the subjects. In many cases, we are participating in the evolving actions. But the key part is we want to understand what's going on, even when we don't use numbers. We want to appreciate what the subjects are going through. We want to see what it feels like to be a teacher, to be an ASU member who hasn't been paid in 5 months. We want to see what it feels like to be living an IDP camp. So qualitative research is descriptive. It helps us understand the phenomena. We can go to the next slide, please. And it's important for us to engage in descriptive analytical work beyond statistics, because as they say, not everything that is important can be counted, and not everything you count really makes any difference. So qualitative research is very important. It helps us to describe what's going on. It helps us to understand, to go beyond the numbers and appreciate the significance of the phenomenon. We can go on to the next slide. With qualitative research, we try to understand and explain what people do in their natural settings. And in many cases, we put ourselves in their shoes. If we want to study teachers, we go to the classrooms and we watch what they do. In some cases, we pretend to be students and participate in the instructional processes for us to have a proper appreciation. If you want to understand it, to study the media, you go and join journalists. That's how we came up with gatekeeping theory. It was David Manning White going to a newspaper in Iowa and watching what journalists did with the stories that passed through their desks. It was qualitative. It involved observing what journalists did with the stories that came to their desks, and then asking them, why didn't you use this story? Why did you use this story? Let's move on, please. So qualitative research is important. It's very useful. And the reason why we do it is because it helps us understand. We use qualitative research to explain what we cannot explain with statistics. And so today, there are many reasons why we do qualitative research. One of them is that it mirrors reality. The second is it is valuable and useful. It's truth, it's honest, it's frank. And then it helps us to also use computers. You can use computers in doing qualitative research. As you'll find, if you use InVivo or Atlas TI, we are using computers, and therefore qualitative doesn't mean it's always non-empirical. And then we can use qualitative to balance mixed methods. With qualitative, we're adding administrative or explanatory aspects to our mixed methods. We can move on to the next slide, please. In these days, when we see that management consulting is critical in all professions, including education and communication, qualitative research helps us in employing humanizing approaches so that problems are not just seen as numbers or statistics, but rather how they approach, how they affect people. We can conclude that qualitative research is useful and we recommend it because it's not very difficult and it is valuable. Let's move on to the next slide, which talks about how it complements quantitative. In mixed methods research, we are combining qualitative and quantitative approaches. Without qualitative, there will be no combination. You'll be dealing with only quantitative, which is only one aspect. So qualitative research, dealing with explanations, helping us understand what's going on, is very critical because it's the second leg in mixed methods. We can move on to the wide scope. Next slide deals with the wide scope of qualitative research. As I told you in the introduction, qualitative research is so wide. With my teammates today, we've come up with about 25 different ways we can use qualitative research. And these include ethnography, where we stay in the field and observe. Sometimes we observe as participants, and sometimes we observe objectively without participating. Many of us are familiar with focus groups. In fact, some of the examples you will deal with today will illustrate the use of focus groups. And then there are intensive interviews, in-depth personal interviews that can be with a small number of people or a large number, and we can repeat the interviews over and over again. Gapsiso will tell you that with qualitative research, the data collection never ends, because you can go back to a second wave even when you are interpreting your results. That's part of the beauty of qualitative research, that you never really say it's over. The results can lead us to further interviews that can yield more data. Another method we use will be case studies, and there are different kinds of case studies. There are historical case studies. We can go to the next slide. There are historical case studies where we look at the evolution of the organization. There are community case studies, like what we can be doing with the IDPs in the Northeast region. And then there is qualitative content analysis, which is very common in communication research. Then there is ethnographic content analysis. When we put together our package for you, I will include a seminal article on ethnographic content analysis, because this is one of the few methods we want to see being popularized in Nigeria. Next slide, please. Other methods of qualitative research include historical research, where we look at the historical trends, what's going on. In fact, Mustafa's study of mass communication research in Nigeria shows that over the last 25 years, there are different patterns, there are different trends that we can identify in communication research in Nigeria. That's a historical research. And then there are many other types where we look at the messages. These will involve conversation or discourse analysis. There is rhetorical analysis, where we are looking at the meaning of the messages. There is cultural criticism. There is narrative analysis. There is semiotic analysis. Semiotic analysis is looking at signs and symbols, very popular in outdoor and advertising research. In fact, in our ongoing study of Nigeria's election campaigns, our members in the Outdoor Advertising Association of Nigeria are using semiotic analysis to explain the uses of ads during elections. When you get our full package, there are a few methods we'll like to emphasize. 4 of these are critical incident analysis, not very commonly used in Nigeria, but not difficult to do, because all it involves is you are isolating a few critical incidents and paying more attention to them. And then there is biographical or autographical analysis. Then there is participatory or communication action research. And finally, diary keeping. We'll try to explain all this in more detail in the package that we will get to you. So I have given you a bird's eye view of what qualitative research is, why it is important, and how valuable it is if you are doing mixed methods. I will now like to invite my friend, Dr. Nuhu Gapsiso, who is the head of mass comm at UNIMED, to help us explain the ways, the hows, how we do qualitative research. So can we go to the next slide, please, so that Nuhu can now take over from me. Chooks, I was expecting you to stop me at the 12th minute. Does it mean I didn't go up to 12 minutes? Remember,
you're quite on time, sir. So I didn't want to bother you.
Okay, that's good, because we agreed we'll take 12 minutes and then you'll let us summarize.
Yes.
But I'm happy
yes,
I haven't got into Nuhu's time, And so, Noho,
Yes.
you have the next 15 minutes. If you use 12, we will appreciate that because it means we have more time at the end for Q&A. Over to you,
Yes,
Noho.
absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, participants and colleagues. I'm going to talk on how we do qualitative research. Next slide, please. Next slide. How do we do qualitative research? It is important that whenever you want to do qualitative research, to introduce your topic, tell your readers what your topic is all about and why it is important to undertake a study on that area. Decide on a question you want to study. A good research question needs to be clear, specific, and manageable. To do qualitative research, your question should explore reasons for why people do things or believe in something. It is important to also provide a background to your study, looking at studies that were done in the area before, and then try to provide justification as to why you're doing a similar study or why you're doing a different study. It is also important to specify your objectives. Why are you doing the study? To achieve what? And then to also establish a problem. What is the problem? What is the gap that you are trying to fill? Is it a research gap? Is it a theoretical gap? Is it a methodological gap? What gap are you trying to fill? What is it in that area that we don't know, that you feel we should know? Then you do a literature review. However, there's a challenge with literature review because most postgraduate students feel literature review is all about cut and paste. In fact, it goes beyond that. These days, we suggest that students do what we call thematic review of literature. You look at your objectives, then you bring out themes, and then review related literature. Then after reviewing according to the themes, you now do what we call review of related literature, where you identify gaps in those literature. This will help you to come up with a problem as to why you are doing that research. So during the process of doing your literature review, you try to interrogate the literature, you try to ask questions, you try to challenge existing theories, you try to challenge existing methods, and then see whether you can come up with a method or ways that are quite different from those you've seen in the literature. Then you also try to evaluate whether qualitative research is the right fit for your research question. Is it the ideal fit for your research question? Then you also consider your ideal sample size. Qualitative research methods don't rely as heavily on large sample size as quantitative. Quantitative, you could sample 20,000, 10,000, 5,000, 2,000. But at most, you can interview 7 people and you can come up with the findings. So that is why qualitative research is important. And also, qualitative research try to study attitude and even people's feelings towards certain issues in the society. They're thinking about certain things in the society. Next slide. In doing a qualitative research, you should choose a qualitative research methodology. Which of the methods are you choosing? Is it survey? Is it content analysis? Is it focus group discussion? Depending on the method that you feel is ideal for the study that you're undertaking. People who go into content analysis sometimes restrict themselves to only qualitative content analysis. So depending on the nature of the research, you will now zero in on the right kind of methodology to adapt in doing the study. Then when you have made up your mind about the methodology you're going to adopt, then what instrument are you going to use to collect your data? Is it focus group discussion? Is it in-depth interview? Depending on the nature of the research, it will now influence the kind of instrument that you're going to use. Then when you're done collecting your data, you now decide on how to analyze your data. Is it going to be a descriptive analysis? Is it going to be analytical? Depending on the kind of method you want to adopt in analyzing your data, you now decide on the best that suits whatever research you've undertaken. Then finally, you now sit down to write by looking at the findings. What did you find out? What are the recurring themes? What are the major themes? What are the themes that are in agreement with each other? What are the themes that disagree with each other? And then try to do what I will talk on in the next slide. Thank you. Next slide, please. The most important thing is after collecting your data, you need to read, you need to reread your data. Read your data, especially the field notes you've collected, the transcripts, the documents and other materials. Read through them carefully. Sometimes you could engage the services of another person to also assist you read, so that you can now keep track of the interpretation, the hunches, the ideas. You should all take note of the important idea that comes to you as you are reading through, and then think about your data. Look for themes. What are those themes that occur frequently? You can now construct your typology. How do you go about writing, presenting your data? Then come up with concepts and theoretical propositions based on your findings from the field. Then you should also go back and read your literature, because it will help you in analyzing the data that you already have. You could come up with charts, you could come up with diagrams, you could come up with figures also. Some people assume that when you're doing qualitative research, you don't need figures. Of course you do. Then writing analytical memos. You should be able to interpret the data. Interpretation means what? Making sense out of the data. What is it that you found out from the field? What is the implication of their findings? What are the major things that you found out? Of course, when presenting your data, it must be able to answer the research questions that you've been able to come up with. The main essence of research is to find answers to your objectives. So if your findings did not provide answers to your objective, then there's a problem. I currently have a challenge with one postgraduate student that I'm supervising. He's studying the communication strategy that EFCC is using. But when he went to the field, of course, it was a dual supervision. When he went to the field, the major supervisor didn't even notice it while looking at the instrument. He was not able to bring out the strategy that EFCC uses. So what I did was to send him back to the field. If you look at even the population, the sample population he used were less than even 5. So you wonder how you generalize that study to even that organization. If you are talking to only 4 people, and these 4 people were not people that are involved in developing a communication strategy for the organization. So students often have that challenge. So you should be able to answer your objectives in your analysis that way. But most times, from experience, I've discovered that students will go to the field, collect data. When analyzing the data, you will not see them answering their objectives. Neither will you see them answering their research questions. So at the end, you wonder, why did you go to collect data in the first place? So I think this is all as a result of their limited understanding of what qualitative research is and what method to use to collect data. So it is important for a student to know that whenever you want to collect a data, you must know that the instrument or the method that you're going to use will actually collect the data that you need to answer your objectives, to answer your research questions, so that at the end, whoever reads your findings will know that yes, you've contributed knowledge, if you've made contribution to knowledge. It is not just enough for you to claim to go to the field or to go and copy what somebody else has done without considering the import of your objectives, the import of your research questions in answering the aim of the research that you've made up your mind to undertake to really contribute something new to knowledge. Thank you.
We have, oh, you have done, right? Thank you so
Yes, sir.
much. I was just going to let you know that you only have 2 minutes more. Thank you so much for sticking to time. So, Professor Malam,
And he was here just a second ago, the magic of technology. So let
what?
me see. Professor Malam, he was here and he just dropped off. Perhaps no, do you
Wow.
want to step in?
So, you will continue, right?
Yes.
Yeah, let me
No,
step
will
in.
continue. And
Yeah.
Okay.
as soon as he pops back in, he'll take over. Oh, there he is. Okay,
Is he all
Professor. Yes, he's back. Yeah, so I'm gonna add him to the spotlight. And are you ready, Professor Malam?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So can you see the screen? You can see your slide, right?
I can see the slide.
Okay,
But
good.
can you
So
see me? Yes?
sorry, we can see
You
you.
can
Let
hear
me
me?
know when to, yeah, just say next when you want me to go on to the next slide.
Just I bring you greetings from BUK and wish to say to you all that I appreciate the invitation to say that our department has now been engaged in postgraduate program and research for close to 20 years. Now, going straight to the subject of discussion, Professor Charles Okibo and Nuhu have done justice to qualitative research by giving a broad overview of what it is and the rationale for doing it. While Professor Gapsiso has given a step of research is conducted through to literature review, data collection, and writing the report. So mine is to take the process still one step further by providing examples, practical case studies of qualitative research carried out in our university. Next slide, please. The first case study that I want to present, can we have the next slide, please? Okay, yes, that's all right. Yes, the first case study that I want to present is a study on social media and changing newspaper practices in Nigeria. And it looked at 6 newspapers, which have both print edition as well as online edition. And the newspapers selected were the Daily Trust, the Punch, Guardian, Vanguard, Sun, and Leadership. And perhaps I should tell you also that this was a PhD project that was completed in the year 2017. Now, the number of research questions, out of which I want to bring to our attention as that main research questions for that study. The first one was to look at the motivating factor by newspapers. Then there was also the second research question, which has to do with, or which had to do with the influence or the role of social media in the
I think we have a little bit of a tech glitch right there. Professor Malam's screen is frozen and we've lost audio. Okay.
News gathering. So also there was a research question on process by the newspapers, attempt to look at the method adopted was the qualitative method, and the tool for data collection was using interview as well as participant observation. And the justification for this was the benefit of depth of understanding of the phenomenon being investigated by using this qualitative method. Now, understandably, the population of the study was all Nigerian newspapers with online editions. And the sampling procedure for both the newspapers, the 6 newspapers selected, was purposive, as well as even for the respondents that were interviewed, of which the candidate interviewed 16 professionals in all the newspapers. A breakdown of the respondents shows that there were 6 online editors, 1 each from the newspapers, 3 news editors, and 7 journalists and reporters who had one thing or the other with the online publication process of the newspapers. Now, the method of data collection, like I said, was the interview guide that the researcher used, as well as participant observation in each of those selected newspapers. For the participant observation, the researcher wrote down notes, field notes from in the newspaper houses, while for the interviews, he used the interview guide. Now, having gathered the data, before the data analysis or in the course of the data analysis, the candidate transcribed the recorded interviews.
Doctor, you have 5 more minutes to go.
Now also coded the data in line with the themes recorded from the interviews. Okay, I'll be much faster. Then the data presentation and analysis technique was narrative, and the data was presented in textual format and interpretive style. Now the findings and conclusions are in the next slide, which I will not want to bother you with presenting because of time. And I will go straight to the second case study, which was also a textual analysis, a textual study of adaptation of 6 stories from a Hausa literature book, Magana Jariche, into television films. 6 stories from the literature book were converted into television film. And the methodology adopted was the text.
Professor Malam, would you want to shut down the video so that you'll have more bandwidth for the audio? If you could turn off your camera. Nuhu, do you want to step in, please? Professor Gapsiso?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, do you mind stepping in? We have that technical problem with
Okay.
Professor Malam. So
Yeah,
he's
I
talking
think-
about case study 2.
Yeah, where he spoke about the purposive selection of stories, about I think 6 or 7 of them. The 6 stories were respectively adapted in the film titled Kill the Killer, Wowo the Malam Son, Bawa the Hunchback, Outa the Ungrateful Husband, The Cock That Is Destined to Crow, and The Magic of Love. Next slide. And the research questions he raised include the following.
He's back.
Okay.
Thank you, he's back. Professor Malam, you can continue. So we're going on to this next slide here. If you turn off your camera, I think we'll have better sound quality. You're muted though. Unmute yourself. Okay, great. Excellent.
Okay, you can hear me now. Okay, yes. The research questions for this study were 4. Looking at the pattern of the sexual adaptation in the transformation of the 6 selected stories to television film. Then he also sought to look at the concepts, the phrases, and the symbolic meaning used in both the book stories and the television films selected. And also the attempt to look at the perception of the audiences, the respondents, in terms of the transformation or the conversion of the storybooks to television films. Now, the methodology I said was, yes, textual analysis, and the population comprised respondents who read the literature book and who also watched the television films. And for that reason, the sampling criteria was purposive. And 15 respondents were selected in 3 different locations, in Kano, in Katsina, in Kaduna, where they watched the television film as well as read the stories from the literature book. Now, the data presentation technique was narrative format, using 5 conventional elements, namely the theme, the plot, the setting, the characters, and the conflict contained in the stories. And the data presentation analysis was interpretive textual analysis, which centered on interpreting the texts, not bothered at all about the correctness of the content of the stories or the films. Now, the conclusion arrived by the researcher was that all the 6 stories from the literature book that were converted into film were successfully and faithfully adapted from book to film. And he tried to justify that by drawing examples from both the film, the various films, as well as the different stories in the books. Now, finally, the third case study was more of a mixed study comprising both quantitative and qualitative method. It was a study conducted in 2010, and it was
Prof, you can round up in the next 3-4 minutes.
Okay, I will try to do that. Now, as
Thank you.
I was saying, the third case study was or looked at the trends in communications research in Nigerian universities over a 25 or 26-year period from 1980 to 2006, when postgraduate studies in communications started. Now, the objective of that study was to discover the research tradition in the different communication departments in Nigerian universities, the theme and topics of the researches that were conducted, whether theoretical framework was used or not, the methodology of those studies, as well as the documentation style. Now, as I said, the methodology was mixed method, combining both content analysis and in-depth interview. And the study population was all the mass communication departments in Nigerian universities. And the sampling procedure was purposive, and 4 federal universities offering postgraduate program in mass communication were selected: UNILAG, UNN, BUK, UNIMED, and 2 state-owned universities, ESUT and BSU. Now, the sample size comprised all the MSc and PhD research projects, because there were not many at that time. And the unit of analysis was the completed master's and PhD projects. Now, the findings.
I wish Prof can summarize so that
okay, just to round up,
next people can also give us
the data was presented in both quantitative and qualitative format, and the findings revealed that different institutions had different focus or emphasis as far as research areas was concerned, and so also the orientation and tradition of research in those institutions, as well as variation in the themes and the topics and the documentation style. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Prof, for that elaborate presentation. I'm sure that the remaining part of that, the participants will get in their mails. So we're moving on to Dr. Mura, please.
I believe that's me, Bella.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Ezema, please. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry for this.
That's okay. I'm really happy to be here this afternoon in Nigeria and still morning here. Any opportunity that I get to engage in any initiative, you know, academic initiative in Nigeria is always welcomed. And I'm glad to be here. So before I go on to share samples of my work and to address how we used the qualitative methods, I poured through the questions that some of you posed during the registration of this seminar to see what is really most important to you or what you would like addressed in this workshop. And a good number of your questions have been answered by my colleagues. You know, thank you, Professor Kibo and Nuhu, for that wonderful background information. But I would also like to address just a little bit the question of epistemological and ontological basis of qualitative designs and methods. I chose this because there were other questions also asking about why is qualitative method looked down upon in comparison to quantitative method? While the quantitative method, a post-positivist paradigm, boasts of having ontological and epistemological background, qualitative method also possess that as well. This is the overarching guiding principles of it, you know, every method. So someone, you know, asked this, so I decided, you know, I might as well, you know, add also the axiological perspective as well. So every research method has a unique way of approaching reality. The quantitative deals with numbers, as Dr. Kibo has already said. The epistemology for qualitative is the way reality is lived. What can be known and how do we know it? The quantitative method can work with, you know, data made up of numbers, collected several years ago, or even most recently. The qualitative constructs meaning through people's notions. And that is why all the studies we've been sharing, including the one that I will share with you this afternoon, deal directly with people giving us their subjective opinions. And that in no way makes it inferior. So this is their epistemological way. Now, going on to the ontology. Ontology refers to the nature of existence of reality, you know, and those that are connected to it. So what happens is that how do we hold reality? No real social reality exists except as people create it. And that is why, like I said, we seek people's opinions through in-depth interviews, we observe them, and we conduct focus groups with people. In fact, qualitative method is actually my method of choice. I go to quantitative, you know, if I have to, okay? And the last one that I threw in, even though it wasn't asked, is the axiology. Qualitative also, you know, possess this. That is the role of people's values, their subjective opinions, whether it is relevant or not. And yes, it is very relevant. So this brings me to the first research I would like to share with you. It is my research on the one laptop per child program that was deployed in many countries, including Nigeria and Ghana, although very, you know, in a small scale. So just a brief background information. This laptop program was an initiative of Nicholas Negroponte, Professor Negroponte of MIT in Boston, Massachusetts. So his group designed the EXO laptop based on the constructionist pedagogy, which means you learn through action, and both the teacher and the student co-create knowledge. So the idea is that elementary school students will be armed with this EXO laptop and then given the chance to create knowledge through designing some programs themselves. So the group cited that this laptop has worked perfectly in various areas, you know, and increased student performance. So I became very interested and curious when I heard that the then president of Nigeria and Ghana were on board to purchase 1 million laptops for the schools. So my interest then became, what is the nature of the educational needs at the primary level? Is this EXO laptop actually needed. I also wanted to investigate if the EXO laptop is an appropriate technology, because every technology, I teach technology and its usage. So is it appropriate first for this level? And again, what is included in the technology, and how does that pair up with the curriculum for the students? Mind you, this technology was to be geared towards low-income communities. So I began to answer, if these were deployed to low-income and poor communities, what about other ancillary factors like power supply, safety, technical assistance for repairs, and so on? So this research was somewhat longitudinal, and it spanned over a year. I started it, and then midway, both Nigeria and Ghana canceled the order. So that brings me to the next research question, or one of the research questions. I needed to know the reason for the cancellation and the lessons of improvement learned from other Western companies who were also pitching, these products. For instance, the classmates' laptops also popped up, and that was geared towards secondary school students in Nigeria. So you can read up on this in my work, which I have sent. So I'm not going to get into the results of the study, but I really want to talk about the methods employed. May I see the slide that has the OLPC methods, so I can talk about that. So the methods that were employed, like I said, I had the survey, and the survey was just used to get a background information, but then to get an in-depth information, I had to use some of the qualitative methods. I did interviews with subject matter experts, such as the principals of schools, the commissioners of education. I also conducted focus groups, and the focus groups I did with teachers, because I needed to know what kind of training did they get and how were they prepared to implement this laptop in their various classrooms. I also had focus groups with parents, because students were allowed to take these laptops home. So I needed to know their experiences on how these affected, their students' learning and other activities of daily living. But most importantly, I did observation. Just like Dr. Kibo said, we do qualitative research in natural settings. So I sat in classrooms to see how students and teachers navigate through lectures, using these laptops. So another study that I would like to share with you is the study about the Pope's resignation. So this research, happened in 2013. If we remember, on February 11th, 2013, all media outlets went into a frenzy with the announcement of Pope Benedict XVI's resignation, at least here in the United States. So it was an almost unprecedented event. So people did not know how to cover it. In fact, media outlets did not know how to cover it. Catholics did not know how to accept the news, and even non-Catholics, So I said almost because just so if you know, we've had popes resign in the past. In fact, the last pope to resign without outside influence was Pope Celestine V in 1294. But that was, that is over 700 years ago. So the media coverage of this event and the framing of the news was my interest, It piqued my interest because I decided to explore to what extent the agenda setting theory played a role in this coverage. The agenda setting theory, as we know, holds that mass media may succeed in telling us, may not succeed in telling us what to think, but the press will always tell us what to think about and how to think about it. So that is actually the basis of my investigation. I wanted to know what Catholics think or what people in general in the area of my research thought about these unprecedented events. The reactions. Is that my cue?
Yes.
Okay. So based on that, so what I did was a focus group. And the focus group also, I consider the focus group of, 4 parishes. Focus group is good, even though it's a small sample, but you can actually select your participants to also represent the population in which you're studying. So I had one parish that is a predominantly white parish. I had one that is a predominantly Black parish, and I had a mixture of both. And then I had some adults and some youth as well. So the next study I want to, talk about is the study about South Africa. So this is it was a collaboration that I did with my colleague, who is an ethnomusicologist, Professor Austin Okibo. No relation to Professor Charles Okibo anyway. So what happened was this also happened during the Ebola crisis. So we decided to present a counter image of sick people in Africa, as having agency as opposed to them lacking agency. So my colleague and I did a study. This is a case study with a South African AIDS support group. They used the choir, dance, and music to cope. They're called the Sifethemba Choir in South Africa. So again, one of our participants asked, how can qualitative research give voice to a client whose voice is not heard in relation to an emotional abuse? And another participant, if I remember, also asked, how can we use qualitative research to alleviate poverty? So I decided to throw in this research because I believe it's a great example, because we were able to tell the stories of these AIDS patients in a way that they may not have the voice to tell it. But at the same time, we used it as a case to counter the images of Africa that is being presented in mainstream media. And coming to the method that we used, we actually used interviews, in-depth interviews method and observations, but also we threw in semiotic analysis because we critically analyzed the pictures and the video clips that mainstream media, specifically MSNBC, BBC, and CNN used in the coverage of Ebola in Africa. So just to conclude, I would like to reiterate that no research method is better than the other. Your choice of a research method, whether it's a quantitative paradigm or qualitative paradigm, or even which qualitative research to use, is based on your goal and what you intend to achieve in your inquiry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc, for that one. We now move to Dr. Adeniro, qualitative research methods, examples from her university. Thank you.
You're muted, Doc. Dr. Adeniro, you're muted.
All right, greetings to everyone who has joined in. A big thank you to the organizers for putting this together. My name is Waima Tadeniron, a senior lecturer at the School of Communication, Lagos State University. I'm also a 2020 fact-checking research fellow with Dubara, the fact-checking platform of Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development, formerly PTCIJ, that's Premium Times Center for Investigative Journalism. Regarding what has been said so far, I won't dwell much on what qualitative research is and all that. I just want to make an additional note to what has been said earlier. It is obvious from the earlier presentations that qualitative research often deals with human participants, Of course, it is not always so, but increasingly, qualitative research deals with human participants. And I would want us to be mindful of the impact of such researches on our participants. The first thing that is that you should do no harm and understand that your research and your career development is not more important than the well-being of your participants. So it is essential to understand that there will be various challenges along the way, but you must be prepared to actually address these issues as it comes along the way. Human personalities are diverse, and you must be mindful of all this when dealing with your participants. So for the main thing now, the first study I'll be looking at is a study I co-authored with another research fellow, Rajiva Saki. We were both part of the Dubai Fellowship Program in 2020. And having concluded this fellowship, because we had two cohorts of the fellowship, we had the part for researchers and we also have another stream for journalists. So the program had run now consistently for 3 years. It started in 2019, and they've done it's usually a 6-month fellowship program. We've had the 2019, 2020, and 2021. For some reason, the one for this year has not taken up yet. Hopefully it will take up soon, but I don't know what is happening in that regard. So the study was essentially designed to examine the extent to which journalists who had participated in the Dubai Fellowship Program had been able to promote and sustain fact-checking and information verification culture in their newsrooms beyond the fellowship period. So this study was accepted and presented at the Global Fact Night conference in June earlier this year. And essentially, we wanted to know how Dubai fellows are faring now, based on what they learned during the fellowship and the expectation from fellows at the time of the fellowship, because we were expected to actually drive the fact-checking drive in the newsroom and encourage and make sure that there are established fact-checking desks in such newsrooms and that there is a verification process in the newsroom such that every information gets verified, goes through for verification process before it is reported as news at the end of the day. So we therefore conducted a survey involving all past fact-checking fellows that were from Nigeria, because the fellowship program had participants from other parts of West Africa, from 5 different countries in West Africa, actually. So we prepared for the survey, we prepared interview questions and programmed them into a Google form, which was used to gather responses from the study participants. We decided to adopt this method of collecting the data electronically from past experience that we've had with dealing with journalists, particularly. This is media research industry, and if your research participants are likely to be media personnel, you must be prepared to actually deal with a number of disappointments here and there. So we wanted to limit the rate of non-responses from participants. So we decided to just send in the questionnaire and allow them to fill it at their convenience. So it was basically open-ended questions. They were interview for a format questions that were programmed into a Google form. So the respondent can just type in their responses for each of these questions. 34 potential respondents were identified, and despite having personal relationship with most of the participants as past fellows also, 28 eventually responded after leaving the form open for a month period. And these responses were collated and analyzed using thematic analysis. The report is currently being finalized for publication, hopefully in reputable journals sooner. And I hope I will be able to share that with you in due course. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the second study, this is actually my PhD research thesis that was conducted and completed in 2018. It was a study on newspaper coverage of maternal and child healthcare issues in Nigeria. The idea is that we understand that maternal and child healthcare issues is a germane issue in Nigeria, and Nigeria is not really very well in this regard. So the study period spanned June 2015, July 2015, up till June 2016. The period for selection was to cover the transition period from the elsewhere Millennium Development Goals into the then newly adopted Sustainable Development Goals. So we try to examine how newspapers were covering it during this period. And we now combine that study with in-depth interview with health journalists who had covered the beat over a period of time. So for the for the content analysis aspect, that was designed to be a quantitative study, but there was some element of qualitative analysis in the course of the discussion. We're not just reporting the data, we're also bringing out the stories behind the data in the discussion to describe the content appropriately. So for the in-depth interview proper now, which was the one that was actually the qualitative aspect of the study, we identify 10 leading newspapers based on existing literature, those that have been identified as reputable or leading newspapers in the country. We were able to identify 10 newspapers, and we choose to speak with the head of the health desk of each of these newspapers. And we adopted the in-depth interview method for it. We scheduled the interview with a number of the respondents, and eventually, despite the disappointments here and there, occasionally, we were able to gather the study, conduct the interview, and develop and gather insights from the responses from the study. So we got an enormous rich amount of data, which was developed and used to build the discussion aspect of the thesis. So based on what we have, the findings were collected and analyzed using thematic analysis also. And because of the diversity that comes from the responses that we got from participants, we were able to publish a number of studies that were not even originally planned from inception. So we were able to get insight and use that to now make some unplanned findings and publish that aspect of it. And the number of these findings had been integrated into publications that are available on the next slide. So they are varied, and most of these publications are also available, I think, except for the first one, which might require some subscription. If anyone is interested, I'll be willing to share the material itself. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Adeniro. And that will bring us to the end of the presentations. And we have here some recommended readings. The moderator, Chooks, going on to the question and answer session.
Yes, thank you so much, all the presenters. I'm sure our participants are itching to ask a few questions or some comments. So the time is now. We'll start questions. Maybe we'll raise our hands physically or virtually so that can take note.
So if you questions, you can pop your questions in the chat section, or you can raise your hands digitally, and then we'll call on you. Let's see.
Am I free to?
Yes, go ahead.
You want me asking questions?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, mine is just a comment. Professor Kibo's paper indicated that analysis and presentation of quantitative research can now use technology, something like in vivo and other ones mentioned. In all the examples that were presented today, I was looking out to see if I could find anyone in which the analysis was done using some of these technological tools. I didn't see. I was wondering, ask Is it deliberate, or is it something that can be incorporated somewhere sometime in the future? I really would want to know how the in vivo and the other methods can be applied in analysis. That's just a general.
Okay, and then there are some comments in the chat box. So Professor Kimbo, did you want to respond to Chuck's comments? And then we'll take the comments in the chat box.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much, Chooks. If I understood your question, I think you're asking that we didn't have any examples of use of computer analysis in our case studies.
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, good. Well, as I said in my introduction, we have more materials in the package you will receive and we have time to present. So at the end of this webinar, I will add examples of the uses of technology in qualitative research. But we can devote a section on that, working with Sister, who is teaching a course in communication technology. And some people I know in Nigeria who are very good with in vivo. We can come up with illustrative examples that our participants will find useful. As I said in my introduction also, there are some methods which are not very commonly used in Nigeria, and they're not difficult. I think the reason why they are not commonly used is because our teachers are not familiar with them. Many of the things we are teaching today were not taught to us when we were in school, and we have to learn by ourselves so that we can be up to date in teaching our students. BUK, I believe, is very good with qualitative analysis using in vivo and or Atlas TI. I understand one of the deans there went to National Open University of Nigeria and popularized the use of technology in qualitative analysis. It's one area where we like to emphasize. And if Professor Mba is amenable to that, we can even have a special session devoted to demonstrating how you can use computer technology in qualitative research. So, Chooks, good comment. We will try to provide materials on that in the package that participants will receive.
Okay, thank you so much for that response. We're looking forward to other questions or comments. But Prof, you want to read the comments?
You want me to read the comments? Okay, so
Yes,
we've got a comment. We've got a comment from Joseph Wilson. And Joseph wants to know when we can use grounded theory analysis. Perhaps Sister Bella, did you want to take that? You're muted.
Okay, yes. I know, sure. Grounded theory analysis is actually used when you don't have a theory that you can use to explain the phenomenon you are studying. In other words, you are actually coming up with your own theory. Often when we do research, we, right after literature review, we always have the theoretical framework to talk about. But usually, you may be researching a phenomenon that perhaps have not been generally or deeply studied. So you are having, if you will, maybe a groundbreaking research, or maybe you're just researching something and trying to find out, So grounded theory is just like, you are pouring through materials and you are trying to come up with a result that will explain that phenomenon. Meanwhile, other research, you always have theory that you're going to use. For instance, I talked about the research I did with the Pope's resignation, and agenda setting theory was used to explain the media coverage. So you may be doing a research whereby you just need to know more about what is going on, and your result will yield something that will explain that phenomenon. That's how I will explain grounded theory. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in.
Thank you, Bella.
Thank you.
Does anybody else want to chime in? Any comments to add? If not, I'll go on to read the next one we have.
I think that's an excellent explanation of grounded theory.
Okay.
And in our package, we try to say more about that too.
Okay, super. Then we've got a comment from Ijoma Ajero. Ijoma says, thank you to all the presenters. And this is for you, Dr. Adeniro. You still here?
Yes, I am.
Says, okay, Ijoma says, Dr. Adeniro, your study on Dubawa Fellowship, did you attempt phone interview? I believe you would be more effective than electronic interview, as participants may likely provide more information when you chat with them. So perhaps you could speak to why you preferred the electronic to a phone interview.
Okay. I understand the limitation of, thank you so much for the question. I understand the limitation of collecting the data electronically, but we have to resort to that to increase the chances of participation, despite the fact that respondents have the disposal to actually send in their responses at their convenience. It took us over a month to gather respondents from just that few numbers of people. So we just try to limit the chances of low participation in the study. That was essentially what we did. And the questions were designed in a way that would actually prompt respondents to say more. If you say something that would be just a monosyllable responses, we try to ask the next question of why did you say this and all that, to actually get respondents to say more about why they responded in such a way to a particular question in the Google form. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adeniro. The next comment or question is from Ifeanyi Chukwudiwonke. And Ifeanyi wants to know, he says, thank you for this session. My question is this: is it possible to have focus group discussion virtually? Who would like to take that up? Professor Bella, you used quite a lot of focus group. Do you want to speak to this?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, with the invention of Zoom, just like we are right now, definitely you can use focus groups virtually. And you know, the beauty of focus group is that while you are gathering spoken information, you are also looking at the unspoken ones, which are the body language, you know, because you may ask somebody, you may throw a question for discussion and people will cringe. You have to note that, you know, because it gives you more, in fact, it enlightens, you know, their perspective or their notions toward that topic. So to answer your question, technology is really, really providing us, you know, opportunities that we did not have, say, decades ago. So yes, you can do focus group using you know, Zoom or Teams or, you know, whatever, as long as the participants are willing to turn on their video camera. That way you can get the rich data, both the spoken and unspoken.
Thank you very much, Bella. And for the next question, I'd like Professors Malam and Japsiso to respond to this. So this is Mohammed Wal Umar, and his question is this: many qualitative data analysis tools / platforms are coming up. Some are online while others are software. I don't know whether they are recommended for a researcher using qualitative research methods. I'd like you to speak to this through the lenses of someone practicing in Nigeria. So Professor Malam, would you want to go first, and then after you, Gapsiso?
Sorry, please repeat the question again.
Okay. Many qualitative data analysis tools and platforms are coming up. Some are online while others are softwares. I don't know whether they are recommended for a researcher using qualitative research methods. And I'd like you to speak to this from the lenses of someone who's practicing back in Nigeria.
Well, yes, I think some of them, depending on their relevance and applicability to the study one is conducting, they may be recommended. In one of the case studies that I provided, for example, the study on the impact of social media on newspaper production. Yes, one of such softwares, for example, the Atlas T, was used in the course of the data analysis by the researcher. So yes, depending on the relevance and the relationship with the topic or subject being studied, yes, some of them may be recommendable.
Thank you very much. Did you want to add a few more words, Gapsisa? Nuhu? Nuhu?
No, I think what Prof said is tenable, but I also feel that, yeah, so I think it's acceptable for one to use, provided there are credible softwares that are in use in other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It could be acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Professor Kibo and Bella, anything to add? Speaking from someone practicing outside the shores of Nigeria.
Yeah, here in the US, using those software tools is very common. In fact, it's more the norm than the exception. And it's like using Word or using PowerPoint as you are doing today. It's not statistics, nor is it technology as such, but it's extension of the tools we use in qualitative research. So I think what Malam said is appropriate, and it's for us who are promoting the more extensive use of uncommon qualitative methods to emphasize that these things are not expensive, they are not esoteric, they are not more difficult than using your brain. In fact, they are simpler, because instead of, as Nuhu explained, you doing various iterations of trying to shake the data to get some patterns, the computer does it for you. And I hope at some point we can devote one session to demonstrating how these tools are used. And as the questioner said, many of them are free, just like Microsoft Word or PowerPoint is free. Some of those tools are also free for now. And even those which are not free are not very expensive. Particularly in Nigeria, where there are funding organizations which are willing to help you purchase these things as part of equipment. So I hope at some point we'll also address grant writing, proposal writing, so that our participants will know how to assess the tremendous amount of money we have in Nigeria. There's plenty of money in Nigeria. And as I told Nuhu before we started, the problem of many of these funding organizations is finding reliable people in Nigeria who will give an account of the money they are giving. They are willing to fund you, but you have to ask. One more thing I want to say before a sister comes on to add to that. You don't go to a funder and ask for money the first time you meet them. Here in the US, we have what we call the rule of 5. That you have to have 5 non-ask conversations with a funder before you then decide what to ask for, how much, and at what point. The mistake we make in Nigeria is to think that Ford Foundation or MacArthur will always give us money when we go. No, you need to talk to them. You need to understand them. You need to understand their priorities now. You need to show them that you can deliver. That's what we mean by non-ask conversations. So you talk with them, let them know who you are, let them know your capacity before you then decide what to ask for. So sister, something.
Prof, you said it all. I just want to mention one simple tool that can actually be used for qualitative analysis that people often overlook, Excel. You know, Excel can actually be used also as a tool for our qualitative analysis. And I think most people who have Microsoft package, you know, Excel is included. And Prof, since you're talking about, you know, grants, I just want to add one more thing. You know, even when you ask, it's always good to have a concrete plan, a detailed proposal. That is usually impressive.
Thank you very much. I've got 2 questions here that have to do with focus groups. I'm going to throw the questions together, and I'd like each of you to speak to it, because I'm not sure there is one best answer, so perhaps you could talk based on your individual experiences. So here, Roslyn, Choma, Amete, and Anthony Uche say, Roslyn says, when conducting in-depth interviews or focus groups, is one required to share the questions beforehand? And the next one is there an ideal number of participants for focus groups? If you could each speak to these questions based on your experiences. So shall we start with Professor Malam? Malam?
Okay, yes. I think as far as the number is concerned for a focus group discussion, usually it is a small group of not more than 12. The maximum number in a focus group discussion should not ordinarily exceed 12. And should not also be less than 6. So it's usually between 6 to 12. But I think even if it is more, depending on the questions, if it is not too large, depending on the skills of the researcher in terms of managing the group and getting or eliciting very reasonable and relevant and useful responses from the respondents, I think one can go ahead to use the number. But in terms of the second question, which you said, please, can you repeat it again?
Certainly. Should you share the questions beforehand?
Okay, sharing the questions. Okay, exactly. Sharing the questions. Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that it is possible to generate data for qualitative research by even sending out the questions to the respondents. But then one as a researcher is bound to miss a number of things. And I think one of those things that one may miss by letting the respondents know the questions beforehand is the possibility of not eliciting true natural response of the respondents. Sometimes when you give your questions beforehand to your respondent, he may likely manufacture the response. But when you ask the questions without any expectations from him, you get natural, sudden and natural responses. And like someone also said, you need to even observe the body language of the respondent. And by letting him know the questions in advance, you may not get that natural body language response. And all that may assist you in analyzing the true response, and feelings and the naturalness of the responses from the respondents. So you may miss out quite a lot of things if you send out the questions beforehand, and that may be to the disadvantage of the data. you are likely to generate. That is my response.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Does anybody else
think,
have anything to add to it? Yes,
probably, can we go ahead? There are a few more ones here, but I think
okay.
those questions can be taken offline, right?
Okay. So we've got Suleiman who's asking, Suleiman is happy with the presentation, and Suleiman wants to know, under what condition or study is the mixed method more effective to apply and why? Professor Akibo, would you want to speak to this, please?
Okay. Mixed methods means you are trying to combine quantitative and qualitative, but in a strategic sense. As we said 2 months ago, it's not just any which way. You don't just arbitrarily use some qualitative and some quantitative, and then you call it mixed methods. That's not mixed methods. You can call it multiple methods. Ideally, you must decide that each quantitative has something to contribute, and each qualitative is not duplicating, but is complementing, so that at the end of the day, you are getting results which are so comprehensive that if you had left out any one of those approaches, the results wouldn't be as complete as they are. So mixed methods are ideal in every situation. You use qualitative mostly when you try to understand and explain, particularly at the exploratory stages. We don't know what's going on, so we use qualitative to understand it better and then be able to frame our questionnaires to address our research questions. We use quantitative very often in explored areas. We already know the terrain. We want to confirm. We want to test again. But in many cases, we do both. Even when you're exploring, you still want to use statistics to be more precise with your answers. Even when you already know the terrain, you still want to use qualitative so that it'll be more interesting. You capture the true nature, as Sister said, the nature of the phenomenon and the values that underline what people do from their own words. They are now explaining to you. And so they are helping you make sense of the data. Yeah, so there is no situation where you should use only one. If you can use both, it's better. You can be precise, but at the same time, descriptive and explaining what's going on.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think at this point, I'll hand over to Chooks. Chooks, there are lots of great comments and questions. I think our presenters would address them and we can send the answers out to the participants as part of our resource package so that we can kind of round things up here. So I'll hand over to you, Chooks. Thank you so much for the responses and for the questions.
You didn't exhaust the questions, so
I know.
Yes, we are actually running out of time. We just have the next 2-3 minutes to round.
So sorry, Chooks, let me just say this. Chooks, sorry, one question. So I know we didn't exhaust the questions, and like I did say, what we're going to do, this is a promise. All the questions that have not been addressed, facilitators will respond to them and we will add the answers to the package we'll be sending out. One thing we can promise you is that this conversation continues after this. So you will get the contact information for all the presenters and they invite you to contact them to continue the conversation. We also do have a WhatsApp group for this seminar series. If you would like to be added to that WhatsApp group, please reach out to us and I'll put our email address in the chat box here. Chooks, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. We are actually coming to the end of this program. Thankfully, the presentations have been quite worthy, and from all the participation and the questions, it looks like we had a very beautiful day. We can now continue time is essence. So we are going to take a vote of thanks in the next couple of seconds, and doing that will be one of our PhD students in mass communication department by name Ogochukwu Ogobe. It's Ogobe.
Ogobe.
So please, Ogobe, please, if you are ready, give us your vote of thanks.
Okay. Good evening, everybody.
Is your video on so I can spotlight you? Or you prefer not to? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on today's webinar series. I, on behalf of the Jacksonite Professional Development Series, University of Nigeria, Nsukka, extend my most sincere thanks to God Almighty. I would like to thank our distinguished speaker, Professor Charles Okibo, for making an excellent presentation and for making this program meaningful and interesting. I would like to express also my deep gratitude to our special guest, Professor Mustafa Malan, for giving an excellent coverage on qualitative research methods, examples from book. Many thanks to Dr. Bella Ezuma for demonstrating her extensive knowledge on qualitative research methods. Thanks to Dr. Rahimat Adeniran, Dr. Luhu Gabsiso, and Dr. Charles Enwerem for his excellent moderation. And last but not the least, I want to thank the team that worked behind the scenes. I am happy to express a vote of thanks to all participants in today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. Hope to see you again in October 7. Goodbye.
Thank you, Ogochukwu, for that precise vote of thanks.
Thank you.
And on that note, I want to say that the session continues next month. But before then, like the prof has said, we are going to be sending the slides and recordings, the links to all participants in the next couple of days. This is a continuing program, as I said. So the next session on qualitative research will be coming up in October, precisely on October 7th, because it's a monthly program. And we are now going to deal on quantitative research. We are hoping that special guests will be Dr. Lambert of the University of Illinois, and he is going to be joined by other speakers from across the globe, as usual. So please keep an eye and watch out for the email announcements that will also come your way. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, professors. Thank you, our EVO coordinator, Professor Mbang, for putting this together. Thank you for those people who are working behind the scenes, the background people who are giving us the backbone to succeed. We are very grateful for the work. And for our participants, I know that next month, we'll also be here listening to our experts. And also bring your friends and colleagues, because they will also gain a lot. From all of us that have put this together, thank you for being there. Thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody. Look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Stay safe and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.